Welcome back to the Sales Pulse podcast, where sales conversations get their heartbeats back. I'm Marla Koupal. I am the Sales Conversation Architect. I'm looking forward to sharing my favorite parts about sales conversations, the questions that create a buying space. Sales trainers tell us to ask more questions. However, many are questions that are irritating, they're nosy, and they're only looking for an angle to get in and manipulate the buyers. Most buyers have no interest in answering those. We've been told for years that great salespeople ask great questions. And I will agree with that, very strongly agree with that. Yet, there is something important that many are missing when they're asking those questions. A great and inviting question isn't clever. It's the question that buyers want to answer. Let's say that again. The questions that will get the conversation going are those that the buyer wants to answer. Let me tell you a short story. In my youth, I discovered something that served me for a lifetime in sales. People love talking about themselves. And when I asked enough questions of buyers, I didn't have to do much talking to get to the point where I understood whether my product would or wouldn't fit, and then I could engage with them more and help them identify their clarity. Now, when I told you I was quiet, don't picture me as an introvert hiding in a corner. I can stop you right there. I've never been an introvert. I can talk as much as you can, or maybe more. But what I realized I like to do was to learn about others. And I had to stop talking and I had to stop telling in order to do that. When I started asking questions that got the buyer talking about themselves, it made the conversation feel safe. I wasn't at the risk of being wrong. I wasn't at the risk of being judged, and I wasn't at the risk of being foolish. Now, I will say I had some mind clutter for a while where I'm going, okay, well, how am I going to turn this around? How am I going to turn this around? But I trusted that because that person had engaged with me, they knew what I was all about, that we would get there. And sometimes we got there rather quickly just because I let them talk about themselves. I became very good at asking questions. Over time, I learned why some salespeople asking questions did really well in sales and others did not. The questions that I saw working were those that were curious about the buyer. I realized that others were nervous and fearful when they asked their questions, and they were going for a pinpoint answer. The more I watched and I listened between those who were successful and those who were getting nervous and flustered and making fewer sales and working harder, it was that they were trying to get control of the buyer. They feared not getting that control. Whereas the others, they knew that the control would be there because they were giving the attention to the buyer. Here's the best thing to think about. When you're asking questions, trying to get somewhere, the buyers know the difference between you just listening to them, being interested in them, wanting to know more about them, instead of seeing your agendas. The best questions are one that allow the buyer's story and details to guide the structure of the sales conversation, to see what you're selling could be a fit for them. Think about the last time a salesperson asked you a question and you felt very comfortable answering it. What made it comfortable? I'll bet it was most likely the feeling behind the question. You felt like they genuinely wanted to understand you. Now think about the last time someone started firing questions at you. What if I said, what do you do? How long have you been doing it? How many clients do you have? What's your revenue? What's your budget? Who makes the decisions? Feels really invasive, doesn't it? So by question number 3, the buyer starts feeling like they're applying for a mortgage. All they try to do is enter into a conversation with you to discuss the possibilities of your product or service serving them. So questions are tools, but make sure you don't make them hammers. Sellers are asking questions to gather information. Buyers want questions that create an understanding with them. These are not the same thing. Information is about your gathering facts. Understanding is about the meaning. What is meaningful to the buyer? So a prospect might say, I'm frustrated with my marketing plan. Well, the information gatherer asks, what platform are you using? How much are you spending? How many leads are you generating? However, a curious seller will ask, tell me more about that. What's been your experience? Let them talk. You can come up with 5 to 6 questions out of what they tell you. The first one is gathering data. The other one is exploring the buyer's experience. Let me say that again. The questions that work are those that try to understand the buyer's experience. Obviously, that one's going to get you into a deeper conversation. When a prospect says, I've tried a number of things, many sellers immediately move to the next question. Like, oh, well, here's why this is good. A curious seller is going to get interested. Several things? Tell me what that means. What did that look like? What was your experience with them? What happened? Did you fine-tune your needs after experiencing those? Did you find what you wanted more than what you had? And how did that feel when you made that discovery? Notice we're moving toward the person, not just the problem. That's where trust starts. I tell my coaching clients that emotions drive the conversation, and the logic later helps the buyer justify the purchase. If that's true, then why are so many sellers spending all their time collecting facts? Facts explain situations. Feelings explain choices. When buyers feel understood, they open up. And when buyers feel analyzed, they shut down. One of the simplest ways to improve your conversations is to stop listening for information and start listening for feelings and meaning. Listen for that frustration or that excitement. Listen for the hesitation or the uncertainty. Listen for what is underneath the words. Buyers don't usually tell us everything directly because they don't know us. The clues are often hidden in the tone and the pauses and the energy that they choose to use when they speak with you. Those buyer cues are the clues you need to continue the conversation. They're easy to miss if you're busy thinking about the next question you're going to ask or what information you still need. Here's a challenge for you this week. The next time you're talking with a prospect, a customer, or a friend, resist the urge to move quickly to the next question. Stay with what they just said. Give it a little pause. See if they don't add a little more. Explore it. Get curious. Not because you're trying to uncover a problem, but because you're trying to move the conversation forward, which will eventually move the sale forward. You'll be surprised how much people will tell you when they feel safe enough to keep talking. Don't think that you're safe. They have to make that decision that you are safe. Questions don't create great conversations. Your curiosity will create great conversations. The questions are just a vehicle to bring curiosity into the conversation. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Sales Pulse podcast, where I always say, sales isn't a performance, it's a conversation. The best sales conversations happen when people feel understood. Before I see you next week, please subscribe to this channel on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify, and keep creating one clear, curious sales conversation at a time.